Always got a cup of tea in her hand.
Good morning. My name is Jan Morrison, and apparently I've been held captive here by these photographers, but they're feeding me well, so that's half the battle. Now, and it's February the 7th, 2022. I was born on, so they tell me, on the 16th of December 1941. My dad was Alfred James Ragg and my mother was Nancy May Ragg. And I don't remember much about my early childhood, but I do remember the polio epidemic that we had, which was, goodness knows, 1948. So I'd have been about 7 then. We were told we weren't allowed to go out, but like the pandemic we've got now, we weren't allowed to go out further than the letterbox. So we used to stand there and watch the world go by. And then later on we had that big snowfall in about 1949. That was so exciting. More snow than I'd ever seen before. I went to Summerfield School, and all I had to do was to walk through the park and I was there. So real easy. But on my first day at school, when the bell rang for playtime, I thought it was home time, so I came home. Mum wasn't at all pleased because she had to take me back again. But I quite enjoyed the early years at school. Had a couple of nice teachers. Didn't like intermediate school very much, except for the cooking and sewing, which is a bit funny because I hate cooking now. And high school, I absolutely hated high school. Couldn't wait to leave. So it was a real happy day when Mum said I could leave, because she had managed to get me a job as an apprentice at sewing. We worked in a small salon and I made wedding dresses and mother of the bride, all those fancy things. I remember being at work quite some weeks before I was considered experienced enough to even make the morning tea for the staff. There's only about 7 of us working there. I thought I'd really come up in the world. We lived in Summerfield, obviously. Went to Summerfield School. And from there we moved to Lestrella Road, which is off Hoon Hay Road. And after that, my parents bought a house in New Brighton Road, which I see now has just been pulled down. I guess it was part of earthquake damage. And I lived there a great deal of my life. That's where I was married from, that house. I remember when I was at girls' high school, I remember biking home one day and I got a detention because I dared to ride my bike through the streets of Christchurch without my gloves on and I had my hat hanging on the back of my head with the elastic round my neck. So that got a detention. When I was working at the clothing salon, I was supposed to be doing an apprenticeship, but the place actually closed down just before I'd finished my apprenticeship. So I stayed at home for quite some time, like about 6 months, I guess, and did sewing at home, took in orders for other people, but then I decided I'd go and get a job, just a temporary one to last me over till Christmas. Well, I got a job at Minson's in their retail shop in Colombo Street and ended up staying there over 5 years. So I actually quite enjoyed it there. I was working with the silverware and cutlery and souvenirs and ended up being the buyer for the silverware cutlery. About that time later on I got married from there, and we were living at New Brighton just after we were married, in my grandmother's house. And then a couple of years later we built our own home in Opal Place and moved there. And that's when the children started arriving. Andrew came first, of course. Yeah, later on, as I was just about heading into the home to have David, my mother had come to stay to look after Andrew at the time, and the last thing she said to me was, "Hope you get a daughter." And I said, "No, it's another boy. That's what I want." So I thought I was pretty smart getting 2 boys. Later on, when the kids were just started school, I managed to get another job just round the corner in a factory, clothing factory. Absolutely hated it. It's about 70 or 80 women, all on machines. Oh, dreadful place. But never mind, I could work from 9 till 3 and have all the school holidays off, and that meant a lot. So I stayed there about 5 years too. And after that I went and worked at the IHC with the handicapped adults. I was there for quite a while. I enjoyed it there. Then I got restless and I worked at a rest home. That was about my longest stint anywhere. I stayed there about 15 years. That was fun, in Cunliffe House. And it was from there that I retired from the workforce. But way back when I was about 17, I guess, 17, 18, I had a visit from a lady who asked me if I would be interested in coming and taking cubs. And she was a policewoman, and she came dressed in her uniform, and I was too scared to say no, that I didn't want to do it. So I went along and took cubs, and it's the best thing I ever did. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Carried on with that for about 45 years. Was it 45 or 54?
40 something, yeah. Over 45 anyway, yeah.
I think it was 54 years. About 54 years I stayed there. Met a few boys, a few second generations, and made a lot of friends. Still got some of them. Yeah. My dad worked in the post office later on in the parcels branch in Christchurch. And I remember in the days when the ferry used to go every night from Littleton up to Wellington, overnight he had to go to Littleton and meet the train from Invercargill to get all the mail off the train and put it on the boat. And I think on Friday nights we were allowed to go, because we didn't have school the next day, we were allowed to go on a train through to Littleton and watch all the mail getting lifted up, and the cars were lifted up in a sling, caravans and things put on the boat. That was a great night out. And my mother worked at home most of the time. She was always sewing, making something for someone. I think it was her that got me interested in sewing. So. Then they bought a caravan and took us all away, belonged to the caravan club. And we'd go away for weekends all over the Canterbury general area. That was always lots of fun too. My dad's parents, I don't remember his father very much because he died when I was just very little. But his dad's mother, my grandmother, she was lovely. And we often used to go and stay with her. The house in Brighton was lovely because it was just a couple of minutes walk to the beach. And she had chickens. We used to feed them and collect the eggs. And she was a great lady. Good at roller skating, took us roller skating. She was champion and I couldn't even walk from one side of the little gateway to the other. I was hopeless. And Mum's parents, now Granddad had a joinery factory. It was his factory and he had all the timber stored at his house. And we were allowed to play in all these stacks of timber. Osh would have a field day now, but we thought nothing of it. Whenever we went to their house, it was always very formal. Had to sit up straight, and children should be seen and not heard. Oh, my brother, we got on well. Well, he's not too bad. For brother and sister, we used to fight every now and then. But as we got to our teenage years, we sort of settled down a bit. And he used to take me. He had a driving licence before me, so he would take me in our little Beetle car thing we had, Austin 7 or something. And I remember him taking me to a dance one Saturday night at Spencer Street in Addington, and that's where I met Neil. So Neil was working in Ashburton at the time. He was boarding down there because his family had moved up to Christchurch. So So it wasn't too long after Neil met me that he applied for a transfer and eventually got one to Christchurch. So, and we were married about 4 or 5 years later. Married in 1964. Going back to my brother, when Ian left school, he also became a joiner, same as his grandfather, and had an apprenticeship. And he did particularly well and won prizes for his work. But unfortunately, the dust from the factory and all the sawdust was affecting his lungs. So he left and got an outside job at Spencer Park as a ranger. And while he was there, he also joined the Brooklands Volunteer Fire Brigade. But sadly, he died after a very, very short illness, and he was only 53. So he was also very involved in Cubs and Scouts and became a Scout leader for a number of years. While I was at Cubs, I had several awards given to me, and but I think the most exciting one was getting the QSM in 2007. And I was made a life member of the Upper South Island region in 2010. So quite an honour to get that.
Thank you very much for this. I'll put this together in a video so all your future generations can see you and how wonderful you were. Tea. Eh? Having a cup of tea, yeah. Need one of those screens that they have up there that you can read it. If you could say one thing to your great-grandchildren that you're going to possibly have soon, what would you say?
Don't look at your grandparents as old people. They were the same age as you once and had the same sort of dreams. And if you're very lucky, you'll get to be this age too. It's not a bad life. Families are very important.
Thank you.
And that's probably about it.
Thank you.